The business landscape is littered with failed business combinations. We need to study these cases to avoid their mistakes. But it's not enough to just make a checklist of do's and don'ts. The most powerful way to learn is to draw key analytical insights from these important case studies. A little bit of theory goes a long way if that theory is rooted in real-world experience.
This happened back in 2000. Here are the specs. A 10-year agreement, start date, September 2000, lawsuit filed 2004, lawsuit decided 2006. Main reason for lawsuit, exclusivity agreements in the contract. Toys R Us signed up with Amazon to be the so-called only toy provider on the Amazon website. Amazon, well, was in a huge growth spurt, right? At the time, it wasn't yet grown, it wasn't yet big, it wasn't yet doing everything under the sun. And so it was happy to have Toys R Us there. But over time, people started having their own shops on Amazon, as you know. That happens, and they would sell a toy. So when they sell a toy, is that really like the Toys R Us one or not like the Toys R Us one? Well, it turns out the lawyers didn't fully work that out. So even because their exclusivity, they couldn't work out. And so the whole problem became that Toys R Us said, you know, you told us we're going to be exclusive, but we can see 4,000 different toys here being sold in competition with us. And Amazon saying, well, you weren't supplying those toys, so we have the right to supply them because your inventory is too low and we need to add them here, right? So they have an answer for everything. What did the court decide? This is the Judge Margaret McVeigh. Amazon did not want a 10-year agreement with Toys R Us. Long-term commitment in a world where technology is advancing almost on a daily basis is difficult to maintain. The negotiators achieved their goal and closed a clever and profitable deal. It was clear it was the negotiators who wanted this deal to work. They needed to structure the deal in such a way that both corporate boards and executives who set the philosophy felt each got what they wanted. It's interesting. Does this feel right? So what happens after this deal is done? We did our job, right? We lawyers did our job. We board did our job. We corporate philosophy did our job. Now go play with it, right? Wash your hands from it. It's very interesting that this sort of perspective, this turned out to be a relatively incomplete contract. What happens when you have an incomplete contract? You need to somehow, as you say, have a way for exit. But there's a more important thing. What do you do before exit? You renegotiate. How do you renegotiate? You have to have a relationship. So can you put anything in the deal to renegotiate in a relationship? Governance. So the most enlightened of the lawyers will say, when there's an area that we haven't figured out, we're going to produce a system that comes to an answer for questions we haven't thought about. Maybe we say in this area, you know, you have the right to decide what the technology differences are going to be because that's your area. And market, you know, we're going to have the control over branding. We have now allocated not the actual answers, but the rights to making the decisions. And so that's a governance system. And essentially, when you have a governance system in place, you avoid getting to the exit right away. If the governance system works, if the relationship works, if the rights are allocated in a way properly, then you don't crack up, then you basically have a way to solve it. So this is actually the definition for me of what an alliance is. An alliance which is short of a full acquisition, but deeper than a transaction. First, it's an incomplete contract. Not because the lawyers didn't do their homework, but just because the nature of the business, the task at hand, the uncertainties of the future, et cetera, are such that you cannot put it all down on paper in an open and shut way. What happens with incomplete contracts? Well, we know there are going to be unforeseen events. That's foreseeable. Unforeseen events externally, unforeseen events internally. Sometimes your own company changes its strategy. Sometimes you end up buying another company and now you change your strategy, right? So you have a product deal and then a piece is sold to Philips and you have to have a new product deal, right? So what happens? So in the end, you need to form a new decision. The word renegotiation was used here. It could be renegotiating the actual deal, or it could be a decision about something, you know, underneath a series of negotiated levels. Before you know it, there's another decision, another decision, another decision. Those of you in an alliance relationship, like in the middle of it, you live down here. Yes? and you are reinventing the world every day, and you wonder why it is those people who made the deal didn't get this right to begin with. And they didn't get it right, well, maybe they didn't get it right because they didn't think about it, but they didn't get it right probably because there's some uncertainty. So what do you have? You have a relational contract. This, again, is the science behind the art. You have a contract to relate and to come to decisions with decision rights, et cetera. And so, to me, it's not really very difficult to define an alliance if you have this in the back of your mind. And notice what it doesn't use as a criterion for definition. It doesn't say, are we suppliers or buyers, or are we equal or not equal? Is it technology or is it branding? None of those things really matter to defining whether or not it's a collaborative relationship, which you might call an alliance. You could have a supplier relationship that has this. You could have a co-marketing relationship that has this. You could have a co-development relationship that has this, right? You could have a joint ownership of a utility asset that has this. You have any kind of agreement anywhere in the value chain and any kind of level of completion, high asset, low asset. If it has an open-endedness, an incompleteness, then it needs to have a governance structure in order to manage the open-endedness. And now we are in the ball game of let's figure out the right governance structure and how you manage it and what's the relationship, et cetera, et cetera.